Welcome in to First Things First. I'm Sarah Kustok alongside Chris Broussard and Chris Canty, of course, filling in for Jenna, Nick, and Chris. Good morning, guys. You guys are sharp. Welcome.
Well, I mean, that's what happens
Chris
when you have
Canty,
two nukes on the set.
Right. We're fraternity brothers, so we known for being sharp.
Okay. I was wondering what that was.
But you got a rose right here between two thorns.
That's right.
That's what it is.
I like it. I like it. All right, we're ready to get this started. I'm going to do so with LeBron James, who said his playoff intensity had been activated. He needed it last night. Lakers rallied from down 19 in the third to take down the Rockets 111 to 106. LeBron James led the way with 29 points, 11 boards, and 6 assists. Lakers now back at 500 and 2.5 games back of the 8th seed. Here's LeBron after the win.
You know, we got a fresh start for us, and it's the second half of the season. You know, the trade deadline is over with. This is our squad. I'm happy with who we got. I love our squad, and I look forward to seeing how we continue to battle for the rest of the season.
All right, Chris, did LeBron prove that he could carry the Lakers to the postseason?
I think he did. I mean, he was fantastic last night. Early on, you know, he had some trouble finishing around the rim in the first half. But he got going, and down the stretch, you know, early in the season when he was healthy, before he got hurt, they had several games that were winnable that he and his teammates did not close. And if they had closed those games, they probably wouldn't be in this position that they are right now. But last night, he closed. They were down 7 with about 7.5 minutes left. He scores 8 points, had that tremendous drive and dunk, which was one of the best dunks I've seen this year by anybody. I mean, that was powerful. That was turn back the clock. LeBron. He also had 2 assists, big assist to Reggie Bullock for a 3-pointer. That kind of sealed the deal. That was a 17-4 run that turned a 7-point deficit into a 6-point lead and sealed the deal. So I thought LeBron was great defensively. He was hustling. You know, that's been a problem with him this year. He hasn't been great defensively. He took a key charge late in the game. Offensively, I thought he played off the ball as well as I've seen in a while. He moved without the ball. He was in the post. And defensively, he guarded Clint Capella at times, which he doesn't always like guarding centers. Not that Capella's Hakeem Olajuwon, but still, he's a center. He's a big man. And so it gave off the air of, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. He had put the pressure on himself by saying, I'm activated, this playoff LeBron, and he had to go out there and prove it. And remember, this wasn't, you know, the Phoenix Suns. This was a very good team in Houston that needed a win. I mean, they're very good, but they've won only 4 of 9 with Chris Paul back in the lineup. They're 11-10 in their last 21 games. So they were in search of a win, too. I thought Chris Paul played one of his better games. It's late, he didn't do as much, but he was really good early on the first 3.5 quarters. And so I thought it was a great win for the Lakers, and LeBron led the way.
No, I thought it was a great win for the Lakers. And, of course, LeBron was the closer in that game. 16 of his 29 points came in the second half, and the Lakers finished that game outscoring the Rockets 51-27. But I think that speaks to LeBron trying to set the tone for the younger players. And the thing that I was probably most impressed with was those young guys coming to the party.
Right.
And so I think the All-Star break gave those guys an opportunity to regroup because the last several months, their names have been mentioned in trade rumors. And so that was put to bed during the week's rest, and then they had an opportunity to regroup, refocus, and then, of course, LeBron making his comments public about the intensity that he's going to approach the game with. I thought that Kyle Kuzma and Brandon Ingram in particular took their games to another level as well. And you saw LeBron trust Brandon Ingram down the stretch a little bit as well. You remember that sequence of plays after LeBron gets that dunk when he's matched up one-on-one and Clint Capella. They go down, they get a stop. P.J. Tucker misses a corner 3, and then LeBron tells Brandon Ingram to go ahead and push it. And then Brandon Ingram takes it to the hole and gets an and one. So, I mean, that's a situation where LeBron is realizing that in order to get where he wants to go, which is making the postseason for a 14th consecutive year, he's going to need those young guys to play a big part in that.
To me, that's the difference, because there was never a question about can LeBron lead this team to the playoffs. It's what are some of those players going to do around him. And when he said that he's activated, there was a difference, and obviously he looked different. He looked more spry. He was explosive. How he actually played and produced on the floor, there was a difference in his engagement with those young guys. And not to say that he has not done that at points throughout the season, but he was in their ear. He was communicating with them. He seemed more positive, more encouraging, you know, trying to explain things on the floor. And to me, that's going to be the difference, because he had talked about how he loves to be in uncomfortable situations. He thrives, you know, when there is chaos going around him. But are other players going to thrive?
Right.
And especially when it's young guys, it's new guys, it's guys that have not been in the midst of a playoff run. So to me, that's going to be one of the most key components is how can he continue to not only perform the way he does, facilitate, distribute, but lead them in a manner of which they feel comfortable.
I thought Cris made a great point with Ingram. I mean, imagine if you're Brandon Ingram, you were in the trade rumors. Everybody's talking about you're not performing well. Kyle Kuzma's better than you, even though you were the second pick. And to have the best player in the world telling you, key game, look, take it, don't give it to me. That's huge for his confidence. That was probably one of the best games of Ingram's career. I mean, 13 rebounds to go with. I think he had 27 points. And then Kuzma, it wasn't one of his greatest games, but he was solid. He had 18 points, shot about 50% from the floor. And there was an incident where he and LeBron were going back and forth on the bench. And I like the fact that Kuzma didn't respond negatively to that. He came out, he still played well, he still hit some shots. So, yeah, the young guys play. Look, this is playoff basketball for the Lakers for the rest of the way. It's gonna, if they make it, even if they get beat by Golden State in 4 or 5 games, it'll be good for the young guys to have that experience. You have to have that at some point, but they're getting it now. These next 24 games are playoffs for the Lakers.
What do you think it'll be like reintegrate when Lonzo Ball does come back? Because they've got Reggie Bullock in the starting line. He was very efficient. I mean, he hit a key 3 at the end of the game.
Yes.
4 of 8
He's their best
from beyond the line.
shooter.
He's a
and they need that, though. You need somebody.
And
he's a good free throw shooter, too.
But I think they have him in that starting lineup so then they can just reinsert Lonzo Ball in and not mess up what's happening with the rotation second unit. How challenging do you think that will be when Ball does come back to just reacclimate him to how they're playing, what they're doing, and just get that type of chemistry within the rotation?
Well, I think it'll be a learning curve for Lonzo because there's a very specific style that the Lakers are going to have to play because LeBron James is very specific in terms of what he wants the game to look like, the complexion of it. And I think last night was classic LeBron. He dictated the tempo of that game, and you saw that. In the 4 matchups that they've had with the Rockets this season, this was the lowest scoring affair. And so I think that LeBron being able to get guys involved in the half-court sets offensively paid dividends for them defensively because you saw Luke Walton said that they got their defensive mojo back a little bit. So when guys feel like they're involved on the offensive side of the court, there's a little more incentive for them to play defense just because you want to get back on offense and get an opportunity to score. So I think that Lonzo Ball has to recognize how this team has to play, what their identity has to be if they're going to qualify for the postseason.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Lonzo has been a very good defender for them. When he's on the court, their defense is much better. To your point, though, they played really good defense last night without him. I don't know how much they need him offensively. So, like Reggie Bullock, if he continues to play this way and shoot the 3 ball well, then it's going to be tough for Lonzo to get in there. I mean, you're going to give him some minutes. But, you know,
do you think they
need
would
more of a
potentially
shooter.
just bring him off the bench? And,
Yeah,
and
I mean, yeah, he's not of the
less...
stature where it's like, we got to play Lonzo. We have to start Lonzo. At this point, it's the best players that we can put on the floor around LeBron to win, and you need a shooter. And Lonzo's not a shooter, not to mention he shoots 41% from the free throw line. And last night, surprisingly, they shot 82% from the free throw line. If they go back to shooting as poorly as they have all year, that could really hurt them because they're going to be in close games down the stretch. And if they're not making free throws, that'll be bad. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting because defensively they do need him. But if they're going to play defense like they did last night without him, I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how they put him in. I thought Rondo was good. His stats weren't really impressive. 2 points, 1 for 4 from the floor, even a -9 plus minus. But I thought he was pretty effective out there with LeBron. So I think maybe Rondo's minutes could be the ones that get challenged by Lonzo if Bullock shoots the ball well.
All right. Great stuff, guys. Coming up, should Zion shut it down even if he's healthy? That's next on FS1. And you can always check us out on the Fox Sports channel on SiriusXM. We will be right back. We'll get to Zion Williamson in a second, but first, the NBA is back. Celtics, Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo chases down Jason Tatum. Look at that block.
Chase down block.
Giannis just keeps coming at you.
That's why he's an MVP in my book, at least right now.
Yeah, he had one earlier in the game on Terry Rozier, too. Really impressive what he's doing, not only on offense, but on the defensive end.
All over the place. Kings, Warriors, Kevin
KD,
Durant.
though.
We're showing some defense.
That's one up in Giannis. I like that one better than Giannis's.
Big old block on Buddy Hield. He had 7 blocks last night.
KD at 7?
KD did.
Wow.
Yeah, Blazers Nets.
Ooh.
Yeah, I saw this one up close, and I didn't like the way it ended. Yusuf Nurkic, though. Thunderous. Nice job over D'Angelo Russell.
That is nice.
Joe Harris.
Don't jump, Jared Allen. Don't jump.
You know, Jared is.
Don't
He
jump.
always
Don't
jumps.
do it.
He always jumps.
He's a
he
great
said, I'm going to be on the
shot
highlight
blocker.
either way. That's what I appreciate about him. Lakers, Rockets, playoff LeBron. Yep, he's been activated. It shows. Chris, that's what you were talking about.
There it is. That's it right there.
Jaw dropping. That looked good.
And
Clint Capella knows he's got no chance right now.
I mean, that came out of nowhere.
But you added about it being a big win against Houston, the fact that it was Capella's first game back, too.
Yep.
Back to Zion Williamson. He is listed as day-to-day with a grade 1 knee sprain after his injury scare on Wednesday night. And while Coach K is optimistic the freshman phenom will return to the floor soon, former Kentucky star DeMarcus Cousins has some advice for Zion. Take a listen.
Well, knowing what I know now, college is bull. College basketball, NCAA is bull. So my advice to him is do what's best for you and your family. And obviously college isn't. It can't really, it does nothing for you at this point. You've proven you're, the #1 pick coming out. You've proven your talent. Get ready for the next level because it's happening. That's my opinion, knowing what I know now.
Canty, what do you think? Should Zion shut it down for the rest of the year?
Well, first, I hear Boogie Cousins' comments, and I guess we all know that collegiate athletics is an exploitative system. The amateurism model by the NCAA is broken. I think everybody understands that. If you don't believe that, that's naive. That's just being naive because these athletes are generating hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for the NCAA. But that aside, in looking at Zion's decision to go to Duke, you have to weigh the risk reward in terms of him coming back. If he's 100% healthy, then I think he absolutely should come back and play this season under Coach K because the coaching that he's getting potentially could be better than the coaching that he's getting for whatever team takes him in the lottery. So I look at this situation and say there is something to be gained for Zion by coming back because getting the tutelage of Coach K is going to be one of those things that could help him transition smoothly to the next level because the jump from college to pro is always bigger than the jump from high school to college. And so I look at, because it's basketball and the nature of the game of basketball, it's not necessarily the risk of injury that you would see in other sports like football or like in hockey. So I think that if the opportunity is there, if he's healthy before the end of the season, then he should absolutely come back and play.
I texted with some NBA guys about this, not players, but like coaches, executives, scouts yesterday. Two told me that Zion needs to be very careful. And don't come back until he's, like you said, 100%, okay? And if that means missing, I think they have 5 regular season games left. If that means missing all 5 of those, whatever it takes, just make sure you're healthy, however many games you have to miss. One told me he would love to see Zion fight through this and show that competitiveness that you really want to see and play. Another told me he shouldn't sit out because ballers ball, all right? But all of them, when I said, okay, if he decides to sit out, will that affect his draft stock? And they said absolutely not. He's still the #1 choice going away. It's not even close. My feeling is that he should get a second opinion. Not that the Duke doctors aren't great or whatever, but get a second opinion. And until you don't come back until you feel as good as you did 3 or 4 days ago. And until you can move as well and be as explosive. If doctors are like, look, you can play, your explosiveness won't be there initially. You won't move like you used to. It'll be a little sore, but eventually it'll come through. I'm like, no. Sit down. Wait till you are absolutely ready to start playing in games. And I'm with you. If he's 100%, if I were his parent and I was advising him, I would first see if he really wants to play. I assume he does. If he's like, I really do want to play, I'm like, look, once you're totally 100% and the Zion of last week, then okay, you can get out there. But I'll say this. If he were to come out, he and his family tonight, and they say, look, Zion's dream ever since he was a young boy was to play in the NBA. And after what happened the other day, we saw how vulnerable he could be as a collegiate athlete. So we're going to sit it out and start preparing for the NBA draft, I would have absolutely no problem with that because I understand it's a business decision, and that's the ultimate dream is to get to the NBA.
Well, and I also think, and we all know this, having played different sports, you may tweak your knee and it's getting back healthy, but your gait is different. So then all of a sudden you do something to your hamstring or your hip or, everything is all connected in a way of which maybe his knee is almost healthy, but all of a sudden something else happens.
You overcompensate.
Couldn't agree more about him being entirely healthy, it being entirely his decision. I don't think there should weigh at all about his competitiveness or want to win by any NBA sky. I don't think that factors in. Do you think in any way, having played college sports, having played pro sport, does he owe anything to his teammates? Like, not thinking about the NCAA, not thinking about anything else, but do you think there's something to be said for those other guys that he's been going through the season with?
It's important to consider the relationship that he has with the teammates and then the goals that they set for themselves as a team coming into this season. But I think his teammates understand the situation that he's in. And so if he's going to make that decision to sit out, as long as he tells those guys first, then I wouldn't have a problem with him making that decision public if he decides that he wants to come back and play, whether it's the ACC tournament or the NCAA tournament. Whatever decision that he makes, I'm fine with. I just want him to have 100% conviction on it. And then, of course, if he does decide to come back and play, it's up to Coach K and the medical staff to also make sure that he's 100%. Because you could be in situations sometimes as a coach or the medical staff where you have to protect the player from himself.
Right.
And so that's the one thing that you do want to be concerned with. And, of course, the way that Zion plays, he's very aggressive. I mean, you have to make sure that he's 100% ready to go because so much of his game right now is predicated on his athleticism. But as far as how the game played out the other night, I mean, you see the value of this kid to that Duke basketball team because, I mean, even though you had the other two freshman phenoms, Cam Reddish and R.J. Barrett combined for 60 points, I mean, that game wasn't competitive. I mean, the game was essentially over when Zion got hurt, and they missed his presence more so on the defensive end than they did on the offensive end. And I was surprised that Coach K didn't even have any answers in terms of how to try to make some plays and get the momentum to come back in their favor, whether it was schemes or whatnot. But in terms of the value that he brings to a basketball team, I mean, Zion is a two-way player. He can affect the game with the ball in his hands or with the ball without having the ball. And so I think that's probably the most impressive thing for me at such a young age, realizing that there are so many other facets where he can have an impact on his team winning.
I might even call him a three-way player. Like you said, he does it offensively, defensively, but he also has the intangibles. He's clearly got all the tangibles, but he has those intangibles of that hustle, playing with energy, that is infectious with your team. So I think I'm going to give them a pass on the game the other night because I think the mental and emotional strain and distress that you go through when you see your best player, and they didn't know at that point how serious it was or not. We saw it with the Boston Celtics last year. Remember, Gordon Hayward goes down in the first game. They lose that one. They lose the next one, and then they run off 16 straight victories. So it takes some time to adjust. Maybe Coach K was even a bit thrown off by it. So, I do think, you know how it is, Chris. Obviously, they love Zion as a teammate. But guys are also like, okay, if he's out, this is a chance for me to step up. And to your question, Sarah, I just think they all understand this kid's situation. And heck, R.J. Barrett and Cam Reddish are in the same situation. They all are going to be one and done. I'm sure they want him back, but they understand what the end game is for all of them. So I don't think it'll be a problem. Like Chris said, as long as he's respectful and approaches them first and stays supportive if he decides to sit out. He's there on the bench. He's, at all the games and stuff like that.
And who knows what happens. I mean, we're talking about him getting to the NBA and being the #1 overall pick, but he could potentially be one of the best players that we see play in the NBA. I mean, who knows? His goals aren't just to get to the NBA, but what he does when he gets there. So I feel like you got to think about the big picture. Coming up, why is James Harden calling out the refs? That's next on First Things First.
He's usually a ref's favorite. Most players would say he's a referee's favorite.
He should. He should. The NASCAR season heats up in Atlanta with the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500. That's Sunday at 2 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app. Time for us to go viral. Enes Kanter dropped 18 points and 9 boards in his Trailblazers debut last night. And with his team getting the victory, he threw some shade at his old Knicks squad, tweeting, "Wow, That's how winning feels. I can get used to that.
Wow, he didn't have to take it there.
You know,
Why
I like
not?
Enes, though.
I like it.
He speaks his mind, and he can put up points and rebounds. He
And
can't
they stopped
defend.
playing him. No, he can't
defend a lick, but he
the
can
single
score
coverage,
and
you can't
rebound.
stop him.
Yeah, he's
They
a
stopped
walking
playing him.
double-double, but still, man, come on, man.
Hey,
They let you go.
he went at LeBron. He went at LeBron, so he'll go at anybody.
Yeah, but
true.
throwing shade at the
That's
Knicks,
true.
he was the one that decided to opt in this year. He knew what the Knicks were doing.
Well, he got to get that money.
But he thought he would at least be playing.
Don't complain. Listen, you're getting paid $18 million.
Now it's time for your AT&T wake-up call. According to reports, the NBA is considering lowering the age limit to enter the draft from 19 to 18. The report also says this is not related to Zion Williamson's injury. Cris, would this be a good idea?
You know what? I think what's best for basketball at both levels, NCAA and the NBA, would be if players went to college for 2 or 3 years. However, what's fair in American life, in our society, is that you can go to the NBA when you're 18 years old, when you're right out of high school. I think that's more important than what might be best for the game of basketball. So, yeah, I think this is definitely going to happen. And I'm fine with it. Now you have the G League, which can serve as a buffer for those players that don't make it or get drafted. They can go to the D League. And I also think college should look at changing the rule where, look, if a kid enters the draft, doesn't get drafted, I think he should be able to go play in college. Like, I don't see why that has to be a rule. So if you put certain things in place to help the athletes as a safety net, then I'm definitely fine with it.
Yeah, Michelle Roberts and Adam Silver got to get this done because the other two major professional sports leagues, that being hockey and baseball, you can go straight from high school to the professional ranks. It should absolutely be allowed in basketball because we've seen some guys come out of high school and have success in the NBA.
A few.
Football is a little different, though.
Yeah,
Football is a
I
little
agree.
different.
I think physically,
Yeah.
99% of the kids would get maimed if they come out of high school.
Exactly.
You know?
To the Warriors, they barely beat the Kings last night, 125 to 123. Steph Curry had a casual 36 points on 10 three-pointers. Can he surprise the Warriors struggled last night?
Not surprised. First game back from the All-Star break. Those guys just trying to get back into the groove. But, I mean, Steph Curry hits 10 three-pointers like it's nothing. Like it's nothing, man. I mean, this is his fifth 10 three-pointer game this year. It's an NBA record. So, I mean, it's just amazing how he has revolutionized the game with being able to be such a prolific shooter.
I like to claim that I was the first person on air to say he's the best shooter in NBA history. I think I was. So
Claim that.
Mark Jackson
Mark it
said
down.
Clay and Steph were the best shooting backcourt, which is true. I think they're the best backcourt, period, of all time. But Steph would be in the MVP race. We're talking Giannis, Paul George, James Harden, if he hadn't missed 11 games. I'm not saying he would win it, but he would be in the conversation. But only 2 players ever have won it while missing 11 or more games, Bill Walton and Allen Iverson. So he really doesn't have a chance.
It's been incredible. Finally, James Harden fouled out with less than a minute and a half left to play in last night's loss to the Lakers. Harden was called for 4 offensive fouls throughout the course of the game. Needless to say, he was not happy with the officiating. Take a listen.
Scott Foster, man, he's I never really talk about officiating or anything like that, but just rude and arrogant. I mean, you aren't able to talk to him throughout the course of a game, and it's like, how do you build that relationship with officials? So, and it's not even that call. Like, it's just, who he is on that floor. It's pretty frustrating. And I mean, and I'm probably gonna get hit, but honestly, I don't really say anything. I'm probably a pretty quiet guy to myself, but it's one of those things where you can't voice your opinion, you can't have a conversation with someone that's officiating the game, and then, you're getting attacked. It's pretty sad.
You feel like it's a personal issue?
Yeah, for sure. For sure it's personal. For sure. Like, I don't think he should be able to even, officiate our games anymore, honestly.
Wow, Cris.
Very strong.
To say the least. What do you make of Harden's comments?
I know Scott Foster. Our kids went to the same acting camp before, so I like him. He's a nice guy. I understand. Everybody's going to look at Harden and say, hold on. Even players say, man, you benefit from calls more than any other player in the league, so stop complaining. I get that. That's fair. But I get what Harden is saying about, and if I don't know if this is the case with Scott and players or not, but that you can't talk to him, you can't banter with him, you can't even question a call. If that's true, I get that, because a lot of officials, like Dick Bavetta, who's one of the historically great officials, he would let players talk to him, and as long as it's respectful, maybe there's you joke a little bit and it lightens the mood. Even if it's a bad call, if you can joke with the player, then it kind of lightens it for the player and they let it go. So I get that. You do want that as a player to just be able to, hey, what do you know, be able to have a conversation with them. So I get the frustration if that's what they're feeling from Scott.
Yeah, it's clear that James Harden feels a way after hearing that commentary after the game. But to your point, I think the communication between the players and the officials is important because the players need to know how the official is going to be able to call the game so they can adjust accordingly. And it's clear last night that the Rockets didn't make the adjustments and the Lakers did. I mean, the Lakers doubled up on the Rockets in free throw attempts. And then, of course, James Harden and Chris Paul ultimately end up fouling out of that game. The Rockets didn't shoot a free throw in the last 20 minutes of the game. So, I mean, there was a little bit of a confusion in terms of how you're going to officiate the game. And if we're going to say that last night's game was playoff basketball for the Lakers, then I think that it's important for both teams to have an understanding of how Scott Foster is going to officiate that game.
I also thought Harden, there was one call in particular where Rondo started kind of riding him up the court and Harden got called for an offensive foul. I thought that was shaky because it didn't look to me like Harden purposely or, you know, really tried to elbow. He got hit in the nose, Rondo. Yeah, so I thought that, look, when two stars foul out of a game, you're going to question it. In the NBA, when does that ever happen?
True. I would say Michael Smith made the call that fouled James Harden out, so it was not Scott Foster. It's been a tenuous relationship between referees and players over the course of the last year, 2 years, and there's been a lot of new referees, and so I think we have seen less dialogue or allowed dialogue between players and officials throughout the course of these last few seasons. I think it's maybe a little more surprising with Scott Foster since he's been reffing in the NBA for 25 years. I do think, though, to a certain extent, so I'm not saying it was necessarily this case last night, Chris Paul, you know, he was on Scott Foster last year. You remember it kind of called him out. But there's a lot of talking between players and referees. And so I think they're trying to find the balance of how much do we can communicate, but there's also a lot of chirping, a lot of talking. You know, whether it's gestures after every single call. And so I think there's a balance, too, between officials trying to find that ground of, okay, I don't want to listen to you after every single call.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The fans are showing up to see the star players. They ain't showing up to see the guys with the whistles in their mouth. So, I mean, well, you know, you got to make sure that the star players understand how you're going to call the game.
James Harden gets a lot of calls.
If things like this keep happening, where all of a sudden the Lakers are going to the line way more than their opponents and stars are getting in foul trouble, if not fouling out, then people are going to start to say, oh, they're trying to get the Lakers in the playoffs and LeBron, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that was the case last night, but that will happen with people because the NBA has more conspiracy theories than any other league.
Well, with that being said, do you think at all in those were powerful words because James Harden didn't just attack Scott Foster, in how he officiated. He said he believes it's personal. He talked about his attitude on the floor and his personality. Do you think in any way we've had so much discussion about the style of play that James Harden plays at and how he plays and, you know, if it's pleasing and do people enjoy it, do they like it? In any way, do you think that factors into the mind of officials? Do you think they start to hear some of the talk that goes around or the way in which, you know, we're starting to pick apart James Harden and his style of play?
Well, I think that could be a piece of it because perception is reality, right? And so everybody's saying that James Harden is gimmicking his way to 30-plus points a night. But at the same time, I think it's important that the officials are fair with both teams. And so when you're trying to get insight as a player into how the official is going to call the game, I think the official has the responsibility, like it's a part of his job description, to make sure that all the players that are on the court understand how they're going to officiate the game. That's important. I mean, these are the best athletes in the world, so they will be able to adjust, but you just have to establish the standard and call it fairly on both sides.
Yeah, I think to your point, it could affect the officials. Look, we've seen superstar calls for years. We saw Michael Jordan's famous shot against Utah. He clearly pushed off. And there was always talk that officials, being human beings, they get it. These guys are superstars, too. And they may even be a little impacted by that, where you make a call on a role player that you wouldn't make on the superstar. I mean, there's a reason you rarely see superstars get in foul trouble, even though everybody's physical, you know. So, yeah, I think they could.
And they try to be transparent. I mean, there's the last 2-minute report that come out. The NBA officials get graded
and
on every single game.
I've talked to referees about that. And I think that's unfair to referees. I got to be honest. Because there's nothing you can do. It doesn't help the team because the team is like, okay, we should have won that game. Wow, that really helps us now. And the official, it just is constantly second-guessing them. It's tough for officials in that regard.
It is. It's challenging. Being an official in general is a challenging job I'd never want. To the NFL,
Cris got no love for my
according to
not even a little bit. Not even a little
multiple Steelers veterans are not happy with general manager Kevin Colbert's praise of Big Ben earlier this week. Here's what else Colbert said. Ben Roethlisberger is unquestionably the leader of this team, not just by my standards, by the standards the team recognizes. If our players were smart, they'd listen to him because he's been there. He's done it. I honestly believe it can be a burden on him more often than he would like to admit. He has 52 kids under him. Cris Canty, have the Steelers set a bad precedent with their praise of Ben Roethlisberger?
Well, yeah, but I want to first dive into those comments that Kevin Colbert just said, referring to the other 52 guys on the team as kids.
Yeah.
Them grown-ass men out there, dog.
Thank you.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even understand that. And then when it comes to Big Ben and his criticism of teammates, I'm fine with them keeping that in-house. If he wants to approach guys in the locker room, on the practice field, or even on the sidelines in games, perfectly fine. But when you go on a radio show, when you're doing a weekly hit in Pittsburgh, and you're public about your criticism and the mistakes that your teammates have made, yet you don't accept accountability and responsibility for the mistakes that you make yourself, that's what I got a problem with. If you go back to the regular season, remember that interception that he threw at the end of the Denver Broncos game? And he says, yeah, that's not a big deal because who anticipates a defensive tackle dropping in coverage? Like you've got to accept responsibility for that. That's a situation where you stand up as the quarterback knowing your position in the organization. You've got to establish a standard. You've got to set the example for everybody on that team. If you accept accountability as the quarterback, then you force all of your other teammates to be accountable. Big Ben clearly hasn't done that with himself, and I think that's what led to the friction that you've seen with Antonio Brown and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I just feel like the precedent that GM Kevin Colbert is setting by coming out and making these comments is a misstep, and it explains what's going on with that Antonio Brown situation, and it also explains why this team, with all the talent that they've had this decade, has only gone to one conference championship.
I agree 100% with everything you said. He went way too far. If you want to come out and say Ben is our leader, all the players know he's the leader, he's won 2 Super Bowls, you know, we're behind him, that's fine. He talked about Ben Roethlisberger like you would talk about a coach. And even if you talked about a coach that way, I think players would push back. Because he basically said he's beyond reproach. Right. Don't question him. Don't ask him, you know, question what he's doing is right. Just get in line. Yes, Ben. What do we need to do, Ben? How can we win? That's what he was talking about. And I think even with a coach, players got to feel like at least I can ask about something. I can question. Well, as coach, what I'm seeing out there is this. Why don't we look at, you know, like, so I think he went way too far. And to your point, I want to address the 52 kids. And look, I think there are times as an African-American in this country, because of the history of this country and the oppression, the slavery, the discrimination, and even discrimination that we still encounter today, there are times when a white person can say something without racial intent. Without racist intent. I don't know Kevin Colbert. I'm not calling him a racist. I assume he's not. He's got a black head coach. You work in a field where there are a lot of African Americans. Okay, so I don't think he had any racial intent because obviously a lot of their players are white. But when you most of their players are black. Yes. 70% of the NFL is black. When you refer to black men as kids, it rubs me the wrong way because for the greater part of of America's history, there has been a concerted effort to keep black men in a state of perpetual adolescence as boys. We were literally called boys when we were grown men. So, again, I don't think Kevin Colbert meant it that way. I don't think he's even aware of it. But when you call grown men, some of them who have families, who have children, kids, and you even put it in the context of being under a white man, Roethlisberger, and going further, a white guy whose character is far beyond, not beyond reproach, who's had his own issues. Come on. Like, that's how I look at it. And again, I'm not saying anything about Kevin Colbert being a racist, but this is how myself and I think a lot of African Americans look at things like this. When you refer to grown men as kids.
No, Cris, you're absolutely right. And it's not necessarily his intent with the message, it's how it's received by the guys in the locker room. And I don't think that's going to be one of those things that guys are going to take the right way. I think this can go sideways in a hurry. And when you couple that with the fact that Ben Roethlisberger hasn't exhibited the leadership traits that you would see from some of the other top-tier quarterbacks like Tom Brady or like a Russell Wilson, you know, that would actually bother you. So, I mean, it goes back to Ben Roethlisberger and how he goes about his business. I mean, the way that he separated himself from the other guys in the locker room creates a strained dynamic. And in the middle of all of this, you have Mike Tomlin, who's done nothing but win division titles since they installed him as the head coach. He's won a Super Bowl. He's never had a losing record in any season. This is an organization, this is a team that expects to be in the playoffs each and every season. But to see all of the things that have cropped up the last couple of years, from Antonio Brown with the Facebook Live video to Le'Veon Bell and the contract stalemate, and now this from Ben Roethlisberger and the friction that he's got with AB, I look at all of these different things and I say this is why a talented team has fallen short of expectations.
How detrimental can this be given the time period? I mean, the assumption is that Le'Veon Bell becomes a free agent, so he may be gone. Antonio Brown, you assume he'll get traded, so maybe you're thinking you can get things back in order. Given the fact it's the off season, you still got some time before minicamp, things like that. What do you think the reaction will be by the team to this, and how much can this challenge that order?
Well, it's going to be hard to put the genie back in the bottle, and you also have to consider the organization's in a tough spot with Ben Roethlisberger's contract, because this is a contract year for him. It's over after 2019. So Art Rooney II has already come out on record and said he wants to extend Big Ben. And so if you're going to give a player more cash, and on top of the comments that the general manager just made, that's just further empowering Ben Roethlisberger to continue to do what he's already done in the past. And so I get a little bit worried about Mike Tomlin being able to reestablish his authority and his voice in that locker room when the general manager has already come out on record and said that the quarterback has the power to even call him out. So in an organization that has had 3 head coaches in the last 50 years, I think that it's Kevin Colbert's responsibility and ownership's responsibility to empower your head coach to be able to take back his locker room. You're probably going to get rid of the distraction of Antonio Brown. They already said they're not coming out and tagging Le'Veon Bell again. So those will be removed from the situation. But I think now that Kevin Colbert has made these comments, they've got some cleaning up to do in order to put Mike Tomlin in a good spot where he can get back to doing what he does best, which is coach this team.
I totally agree, because I think this was an opportunity. When you get rid of Le'Veon and Antonio, this is an opportunity to get back to the Steeler way, where you don't have these distractions, where it's all team-first personalities. But now I think you've messed that up. And I think Kevin Colbert's got a lot of work to do, because, look, you didn't hear any players come out and criticize Antonio Brown. Even as bad as what he did was by skipping out on that last game, they threw out an olive branch at the Pro Bowl. Hey, we want him back. Now, Ben, I just think that the players, you saw where Antonio said that Ben had an owner's mentality. You can see why after comments like this by the GM. So I wonder if, players, they seem to be siding with Antonio, at least in terms of his character and who he is as a person. And I think that this could just divide that locker room a little bit. I don't even know. Maybe Colbert needs to come out and issue not an apology, but some type of another statement, or because
he's got to explain those comments.
If he just says he's got 52 men to lead and we got to get behind him, that's fine. Yeah. But he went way too far.
The Steelers have dealt with tumultuous situations before, and I know it's still very early, but L. Bell's gone. You assume Antonio Brown's gone. What are realistic expectations for this team next season?
Well, this team comes into every season trying to win the division. But when you have a quarterback that's in his late 30s and you're talking about giving him more money, there's only one reason that you're doing that. You're expecting to win a championship. And the knock on the Steelers team, in the years prior to the last 2 seasons has been the defense hasn't been able to match what the offense is bringing to the table. But the last 2 seasons, they've had a top 10 defense. So really, this is on Ben Roethlisberger to get this done. If the organization is going to make a financial commitment to him and put him in this type of situation where he's at the top of the hierarchy, he's got to deliver. So I think the pressure has to be on Ben Roethlisberger, because he's shown when you have arguably the best wide receiver in the game and you have arguably the best running back in the game, he hasn't been able to get it done. So I think a lot of what happens for this Steelers organization in the next couple of years is going to be on Big Ben. And if they give him a new contract extension, that means more pressure.
All right, back to the hardwood coming up. Did last night prove LeBron's playoff mode is activated? That's next on First Things First. Welcome back to the show. Bleacher Report's senior NBA writer Howard Beck joins the show. What up, Beck?
Good morning.
It's so good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm almost awake.
He said almost awake.
I said you look bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. You were at the game in Brooklyn last night. Here you are on no sleep.
It's a little, tiny bit.
We're excited.
Coffee.
We're
Good
excited.
coffee.
Keep it going. We got a lot to talk about here, and taking a look at some of the teams in the East, including the big matchup last night between Kyrie and the Celtics and Giannis and the Bucks. Less than 6 minutes to go. Chris Middleton misses the shot, outlet pass to Jason Tatum, and look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. Monster chase down block. He got it done on the defensive end. He also finished with 30 points, and then less than 2 to go. Celtics down 1, and Kyrie just absolutely absurd up and under. So game side in 95, and it's Chris Middleton who hits the big go-ahead 3. Kyrie, a chance to win it at the buzzer. Some good defense there, and no good. Bucks win it 98-97. Howard, what did last night tell you about the East that you didn't already know?
I don't know if it told us anything that we didn't already know. I think what it reinforced is that there are no good predictions right now. There is nothing safe about the top of the Eastern Conference. If you told me that any combination of Milwaukee, Toronto, Philadelphia, Boston, whichever pick them out of a hat, tell me that they're in the conference finals, I will believe you. Tell me that any one of them is the team that actually emerges from the East, I will believe you. I really believe it's going to be a dogfight. These teams are so different. They're all very good. They're all strong defensively. I think if anything last night, what it reinforced too, though, is Giannis is not messing around. Not when it comes to that MVP potential, and not when it comes to trying to lead this team to the title.
Yeah, I'm with Howard. I mean, and I don't put Philly, as talented as they are, I don't put them with Toronto, Milwaukee, and Boston. I just think that Ben and Embiid aren't quite ready yet to win at the highest level. I certainly don't think they can beat Boston. I think, Brad Stevens has their number. But you're right, those 4 are all very good teams. Some of the things that were reinforced last night. Kyrie Irving is probably the best closer in the league. I mean, he is downright scary at the end of a game. If you're an opponent of the Celtics or an opposing fan, I mean, he wasn't having a good game.
No.
And he just took over down the stretch, and dude is unstoppable. So that's one thing. Secondly, Milwaukee's my pick. I mean, like you said, it's hard to pick any of these 3 teams, or 4 if you want to put Philly in there. But I've picked Milwaukee. The thing I like about them, Giannis is obviously great, and he's 3rd in the league in fourth quarter scoring. However, at the end of games, what I like about them is they're different than most other teams. At the end of the game, the ball finds the open man. Even if it's not Giannis. Last night it found Chris Middleton with 32 seconds left. He hits the 3-pointer. Other teams, we know they're going to Kyrie. We know they may be going to Kawhi. We know they're going to LeBron or whatever. I like kind of the ball finding the open guy and empowering other guys to make a big play.
I think even that whole sequence down the stretch. I mean, we see Giannis hit a basket, Middleton with the big 3, Bledsoe taking it to the basket, Brogdon had a big pull-up shot. We've talked so much about the Celtics and Brad Stevens and the confidence we have in what he can do. Howard, what do you make of Mike Budenholzer now being the head coach of Milwaukee, what he's done, and also when we bring up Toronto, Nick Nurse, and just, his first season as a head coach with this team, despite the continuity. Is there an edge anywhere to you and kind of how you look at the coaching and the matchups and what that may factor into when you look at these top teams in the East?
Well, it's interesting, the contrast between those two, right? Nick Nurse, a rookie head coach, Mike Budenholzer, who had not only all those years as an assistant in San Antonio, but had the experience in taking an Atlanta team that really, it didn't scream star power, but they became better than the sum of their parts and a 60-win team because he maximized everybody there. That's what Mike Budenholzer is doing in Milwaukee. It's very, very rare in this league, as we all know, to take a team with no major additions. No All-Stars joined them in the summer. There was no...
Brook Lopez isn't a major addition.
We love Brook Lopez. We love Brook Lopez.
My favorite.
Ersan Ilyasova, great guy.
His 10th stint with the Bucks.
But the Bucks went from middle to lower of the pack playoff team, 7th seed, to dominant in the East with one major addition, the coach.
So I think it comes down to the defense for me, and that's why I trust the Milwaukee Bucks, because once we get to the postseason, we know the style of basketball changes compared to what we see in the regular season. So if you ask me, what did we learn about the East last night? I think we learned that it's probably going to be a two-team race, and I think those are going to be the two teams left standing at the end, just because of what you talked about with Kyrie being one of the best closers in the game. And Boston is a deep team. Now, granted, they haven't learned how to play together yet because you have Kyrie, and he's been a bigger part. You know, he dealt with the injuries last year, and so you have Gordon Hayward. He had the injury last year. I think they're still trying to figure out how to play with one another, but I think they're taking steps in the right direction. And now is the time of the season where we see these teams ratchet up the intensity a little bit. So when I looked at that game last night, I mean, you're really one foul call away from Kyrie hitting 2 free throws and that being the game winner. It's a situation right like that where these two teams, based on what we've seen so far in the regular season and how they're playing now, I trust them more than I trust Philadelphia, more than I trust Toronto.
I agree, because people looking at Boston as the 5th seed and saying, oh, no. Boston, I would not be the least bit surprised if they get to the finals. Because, as you say, all these issues they're having, Kyrie and the young guys and the back and forth and figuring it all out, they still went to Milwaukee, which has the 2nd-best home record in the league, and almost won. And like you said, could have easily won that game. So they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs.
Is it?
I was going to say, and by the way, Eric Gordon probably fouled Kyrie on that last play. And by the way, also, the Celtics of those 4 teams are the ones with the most continuity.
Right.
Yes, they had the issue of trying to get Gordon and Irving reintegrated again, but that team's been together, and they were in Game 7 of the conference finals. They're the most proven commodity. Philly hasn't been that deep. Milwaukee, as we were just talking about, was a low seed a year ago. Toronto is new with Kawhi there. Boston's the team that has proven it.
Is it silly of us? I know when Victor Oladipo got hurt, we kind of wrote off Indiana. I'm not sure even anyone necessarily had them in their top 4. They're currently sitting in the 3rd seed still. Nate McMillan has done an incredible job. Maybe not necessarily to come out of the East, but do the Pacers concern you at all if they end up being in one of those top 4 spots? Do you anticipate them staying there? And is there a tough matchup for any of these teams against that Pacers group?
I would just say that the Pacers, for one, have hung incredibly tough without Oladipo and should not be counted out at all. I don't see them getting necessarily to the semifinals or the conference finals, but could they play spoiler? Yeah, they absolutely could. Even if they slip to 5th, if you're the 4th seed, I don't think you want to see the Pacers in the 1st round. Awesome.
All right. Howard, stick around. We've got more with you coming up. Did last night prove the Lakers are playoff bound? That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First with Bleacher Report senior writer Howard Beck. Last night, the Lakers rallied from down 19 points in the 3rd to take down the Rockets 111-106. LeBron led the way with 29 points, 11 boards, 6 assists. And the Lakers are now back at 500 and 2.5 games back of the 8th seed. Here is LeBron after the win.
You know, we got a fresh start for us, and it's the 2nd half of the season. You know, the trade deadline is over with. This is our squad. I'm happy with who we got. I love our squad, and I look forward to seeing how we continue to battle for the rest of the season.
Howard, did LeBron prove last night that he can carry the Lakers into the playoffs?
He reminded us. I mean, I think he'd proven that before, right? And then he missed 17 games, and things kind of went haywire, and then they tried to trade his whole roster. So, no, I mean, the one thing we should not have doubts about the Lakers, and I don't think anybody really has, is that as long as healthy, LeBron's still LeBron. The question has always been about, what about the rest of these guys? Brandon Ingram had a huge game last night, and that was the guy that everybody was saying or expecting and hoping to see if you're a Laker fan. Where has that been? Can he keep doing that? Because LeBron needs a wingman at some point, and no one has emerged from that group. As much as that young group was hyped, no one has emerged, and that's why they were all on the trade block, because it was, hey, maybe somebody else can make better use of you. So I don't, to me, it's never been about how far LeBron can carry the Lakers. It's how far those guys can support him to get him where he needs to go.
Well, here's the one thing, and to your point, I think LeBron hasn't gone out his way to get those guys involved early on in the season because LeBron didn't know what was going to be possible or what wasn't going to be possible at the trade deadline. But now that these guys realize this is the team that they have moving forward, we're past the All-Star break, Like, this is the time of year where LeBron recognizes, okay, it's got to pick up. And it's probably a little earlier than he would like. Matter of fact, that's exactly what he said earlier in the week. Like, he has to turn it on a little earlier just based on the situation that they're in. But right now, they're 2.5 games behind the Clippers. The Warriors did them a solid by beating the Kings last night. So it's absolutely inside the realm of possibility that the Lakers could make a postseason push. But I think in order to do that, it's going to be on LeBron to get those young guys involved. And I think we saw glimpses of that last night, him deferring to Brandon Ingram and Kyle Kuzma in certain situations. I thought it was a sneaky good move at the deadline by Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson to trade for Reggie Bullock because he provides some outside shooting. They can space the floor in half-court sets. But ultimately, it's going to come down to LeBron being able to trust those young guys because they're going to have to play an integral role if they're going to make a push for the postseason.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's never been about LeBron's production. Obviously, even in the first half, when some people thought he wasn't playing as well, his numbers were still through the roof. But there have been questions, and fair ones, about his intensity, his energy, his defense, his engagement. And last night, I thought he brought all those things. There were times, a few times, where body language was bad, but that's to be expected maybe from any star player. But look, defensively, I thought he hustled. We saw him take the big charge late in the game. I think he set a good tone for the guys on that end of the floor. He guarded Clint Capella in spells. He doesn't really like guarding big men in the post. And then offensively, he moved more without the ball than I've seen him in a while. He posted up, and sometimes I felt like he should have been more aggressive in trying to score in the post. He had Chris Paul on him sometimes, P.J. Tucker. But still, he was down there posting up, playing off the ball. I just think he set a better tone for all the other guys to follow. And now I don't think they're looking at it like, man, it's kind of LeBron and then the rest of us, and he's kind of looking at getting rid of us anyway. Now I think they're saying, okay, he's engaged. We're all in this together. Let's follow the leader.
And it seemed like that. It seemed much more of a collective effort. He's activated not only in his play, but also mentally engaged with these guys. Howard, do you think Brandon Ingram is the most important piece, the most important factor aside from LeBron to help get them there? When you look at this roster and you look at these players, what guys need to make sure that they are consistently impactful for this Lakers team to get to the postseason? Yeah,
you could go any number of directions with this, Sarah, right? Like, Brandon Ingram is the guy who can do the most. I mean, he's a versatile wingman for LeBron, a guy who can also handle the ball, make plays, score when he's on his best nights, and a versatile defender. But you could say that Lonzo Ball is key because this team, when it's been at its best defensively, it's with Lonzo at the point, and they got to get him back healthy. But it's this is not a proven group. Let's remember, this is a group that was in the lottery for the last several years without LeBron, and he's still new to them. And I think we kind of keep forgetting about, look, there's still an integration process that goes on over the course of a season here.
Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no. But Ingram is the guy who I think had to make one of the biggest adjustments. Not having the ball in his hands as much, not being able to try to lead the way. We saw him try to do a little bit when LeBron was out. Mixed results. But I feel like if he really emerges, they're solid. They're in great shape. They're going to make the postseason.
What do you think the integration process will be like for Lonzo Ball when he comes back? How challenging do you think that will be for both Ball and for LeBron in this group?
I think it's going to be really tough because if these guys really get on a roll, and, last night, look, we've seen some false starts by the Lakers before, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But if they really get on a roll, and that's happening without Lonzo Ball. And you've already got, LeBron has the ball in his hands, and Rondo's got the ball in his hands, and Ingram can do a lot with the ball in his hands. Lonzo's going to have to try to figure out, well, where do I fit in this? Because that's really the one thing he does, that and defense. He's not going to sit out there as a spot-up shooter. We know that. So, yeah, I think that's going to be one of those key questions down the stretch.
Yeah, I've wondered about it because they do play him a lot as a spot-up shooter, because LeBron has the ball. But if Bullock can bring what he brought last night. He is their best three-point shooter. Yeah. That's why they signed him. He hit, 4 last night, I think, with 14 points.
Yeah.
If he does that, I'm with you. Like, Lonzo is great for their defense. But if Bullock is shooting the ball like that, where does he fit in offensively? That's an interesting question. Maybe he takes Rondo's minutes, but it'll be interesting.
Canty brought up a great point about LeBron saying that he has gotten himself, a little bit earlier than he's anticipated, ready for his postseason form play. Do you think LeBron could sustain this at this age, at his mileage? Do you anticipate that he can play in this manner and with this engagement throughout the course of these last 24 games?
I have no doubt about it as long as he stays healthy. I mean, the guy is superhuman. He seems indestructible. We saw a little bit of a nick in that, with the groin injury. But as long as LeBron's healthy, I mean, what have we seen that would make any of us doubt that LeBron can sustain it at this level? I think he can. I think he will. I think they're going to lock down one of those last playoff spots in the West. They've got 2 games left against the Clippers and 1 against the Kings. They've got every opportunity to make that push.
Yeah, I trust LeBron James when he says that he's going to ratchet up the intensity. I think this is going to be his sustained level of play, but it's more about being able to trust the young guys. And I think that LeBron James showing those guys that he trusts them in big spots goes a long ways in terms of being able to instill confidence in them. And a confident player that understands his role is going to be a more effective player. And confidence also comes from demonstrated performance. So I think those young guys proved something to themselves last night, mainly Brandon Ingram and Kyle Kuzma, because you saw in certain situations late in that game, LeBron James deferred to the young guys. So if they can continue to have that kind of rapport moving forward down the end of the regular season, I think they'll find themselves making it to the postseason.
Yeah, and I think something that's going to help him stay motivated to play at this level the rest of the regular season is that, look, he won't admit it, and I'm not suggesting he's happy or satisfied with anything but a championship, but he knows in his heart of hearts, getting this team to the playoffs at this point is a victory. Even if you go there and get swept by Golden State or beat in 5 games. And I think he's also pushing for that 7th seed. Like, because I believe if they get to 7, and I know Denver is a very good team, but they're nothing special on the road, and none of them have any type of postseason experience, I would take LeBron James in that series with Denver. So I think he's probably eyeing, I'm not just trying to get in at 8. I'm trying to get in at 7, and maybe we can make some noise.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.